Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, and this week joining us from the Netherlands is Pascal Clarkson. Hi Pascal, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. So Pascal has a bachelor in computer science. After years of working as a software engineer and having nearly a decade of practical experience with Scrum, he shifted his attention towards group facilitation. He uses systemic modeling and other methods to support groups in their discovery of how they can be the best version of themselves. Awesome. So Pascal, that was a short intro. Take a minute, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Right. So I've ever since like high school, I've been very interested in personal development, and I'm always the type of person that likes to teach people how to fish instead of like selling them fish. A while back, I was with a Scrum team working, and then they kind of like did some reorganization of a couple of teams. So there was a new team formed. And then everybody that was in that team kind of like when the question came up, like who's going to be the Scrum Master, everybody took a step back. You know, the classical thing, like, yeah, not me. And there I was standing at the front of the line suddenly. And it's like, oh, okay. So I guess I'll do it. That's how I literally became the Scrum Master for that team. And that was the first time I took on the role. But it's always been kind of part of me, like really wanting to work with people and try to find what it is that they need and to help them achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds very familiar. I think many of our listeners have been caught in that position at the front of the line when everybody stepped back. So Pascal, today's Monday, so we want to explore one of those lessons that you learned that you want to share with the community. So tell us a story of a moment where you, as a Scrum Master, you tried your best, but at that time, as it normally goes, you still had a lot to learn. So share that story with us. Then we dive into the details and what that means, but share the story first.
Sure. And this wasn't that long ago, actually, because I think we're all still learning every day. I was working with another Scrum Master. I was with the company as a Scrum Master and an Agile coach. And so I was also like observing the other Scrum Master and giving them feedback and helping them with issues that they came across, like more on a level of peer support. And I had introduced myself with the team that he was working with during one of their stand-ups, and I visited some of their stand-ups as well. And this time I entered to kind of observe and listen in on their retrospective. It really took me by surprise that somebody at some point like started questioning like, so what are you doing here and what's going on? And so what happened is that I kind of made the assumption that everybody was on board on why I was there. But apparently, as I made the assumption, that wasn't the case. And the Scrum Master didn't really got to that point either. So this person felt like hugely violated kind of in his privacy, sort of. And so that kind of escalated as well. And yeah, so that was a really interesting situation that was happening, especially because it was during the COVID and working online, everybody as well. So that's something that to me was really interesting.
When we look at that story, like one of the things that comes to mind immediately is that first we need to recognize that we are dealing with people and that we should treat others just like we expect and want others to treat us. Like nobody wants a stranger to suddenly appear in their whatever private sphere, whether it's work or family. That leads me to the idea that introductions are very important. How we start off the relationship is very important. But that's my thought and what I was thinking about. When you look back, Pascal, What are the key takeaways, the things that you then learn that you still apply in your daily work today?
Yeah, so it really is about being indeed conscious of what's happening for them, um, not making the assumption that they are clear on what's going on, and indeed giving a short introduction, like, okay, so I'm here just to observe, in this case, the dynamics between the Scrum Master and the team, and in order to help the Scrum Master be a better Scrum Master. Yeah, so that's something that I'm really got more conscious of, basically.
So what now, when you think about entering a new team or entering a new client, like what are the things that you have on your checklist to make sure you do before you start sitting in on Teams meetings?
Yeah, so one of the things is to really be clear on what it is. So within systemic modeling, we call it framing. Just give a short introduction. Like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And different people within the group will have different needs of what needs to be in that framing. So some pieces might be about the why. Others want to know about, like, okay, so who is this person? So they might want to have questions. So that's usually what we do as well. It's like, okay, so apart from our framing, what else would you like to know before we begin? And just open it up to the whole group to not only be interested in them, but also to give them a moment where they can say, like, okay, I'm advocating for this piece of knowledge or information that I would like to have before we start off with this.
So there's one thing that we very often mention here on the podcast, which is this idea of listening, right? So when you get in, just listen to what's going on. And it sounds to me, or at least from this story, I would say that one key aspect of listening is really to create an environment where people can start asking you questions from the beginning, because the questions they ask are going to be critical, it seems to me, in how the relationship develops.
Definitely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So being curious to what's on their mind, what they have to say, and what questions they have, that is what will tell you what they actually need from you. Because a lot of people might have this presupposition or presupposed idea of this is what the team needs. And it might be management, it might be the PO or somebody else or another Scrum Master, and they all have this idea. But in the end, it's the people themselves that need to be telling you, like, okay, this is what we actually need. And yeah, you learn that by listening to that. Definitely.
And then the other thing that came to mind is that we are actually talking about multiple entities that we are getting introduced to, right? So the team as a whole, that's one entity, but then every team member separately. And it may seem like a bit weird to think about it this way, but it's quite visible and illustrated by the different questions that every team member asks and the questions that emerge from that dialogue, right? Like what emerges from the dialogue is what the team wants. I'm doing air quotes here. Wants to know, obviously. And then what everyone asks, like what every single person in the room asks, is what they want to know, right? And that kind of interacts with each other. That generates new thoughts, new ideas, both for us as Scrum Masters, but also for the team, right?
Definitely, yeah. It will also illustrate where the gaps are. If you start asking that, people will see, like, oh, so these are the kind of questions that are coming around. These are the types of information that people are asking for. And I know all of this, but I don't know about that. So this is still things that I would like to ask about. So it even is very interesting to take an approach where you just gather the questions first and answer them all later, to just get kind of that feeling going, like, okay, so what is it this system wants?
What is it that the system wants to know and explore? Indeed, that's a great introduction to this week. I love how we are talking about listening, not from asking questions, which is something we need to know how to do as Scrum Masters, but actually to listen to the questions that are being asked. And I think that gives another level of depth to this idea of listening, right? Because very often we talk about listening as us asking questions, but actually, if we just sit back and let the team ask questions, and then we think about what those questions might trigger and what they might mean, that's also a very important aspect of what we call listening.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Just to add on that one is like what I really love about this thing that I do, like systemic modeling, is that we also ask questions about the questions. Just take it a little bit meta, just to kind of emphasize what is it that people want and what are we talking about. And when we start accepting those answers of those meta questions and really get curious about that as well, we kind of get to a higher level of communication where we get a bit more insight on how people work. And I think it's right there when we get into their way of thinking and their way of acting and their habits and behaviors, where we can find the rich pieces to work with, because that's where we find also like how are they acting or how are they thinking when they're at their best or when they're at their worst, and how can we use that knowledge within the team to get better collaboration.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great intro to in-depth coaching. I'm sure there would be another episode just in that conversation, but unfortunately, we're finalizing the Monday episode here. So thank you for sharing that, Pascal.
Yeah. Again, thank you for having me, and looking forward to tomorrow.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.